Verse 426. Birth and no birth, emptiness and no emptiness, self-nature and no self-nature, these are not discriminated by the knowing one. In mind only, no such things obtain. In the previous verse, I described or gave some indication of the sort of stuff we're up against. Basically, it's the stuff of everyday life, of our circumstances, but also there's what's going on in our bodies, our moods, our emotions. It can be quite a tempest. And the secret to enlightenment practice is to extricate ourselves from this, to extricate the attention from all of this, to bring the attention back to its essential nature. But there's all this stuff going on. It's like it's demanding our attention. And if you're a thoughtful, sensitive person, you think about this. You think about what's going on. How perhaps some of it's unfair. A lack of social justice, natural calamities, terrible things that we do to animals. So you might be prompted to look into things a little more deeply, become a bit of a philosopher, maybe become a scientist, or be interested in what the scientists come up with. Look at the world and try and get a system for understanding it, either a scientific system or a religious system. And this is what this verse is addressing. It's addressing the fact that we need to drop all of that. So, for example, the first thing that we need to drop is birth and no birth. And these are two of these terms which might not come naturally to you. They seem a bit technical. But they were covered in verse 202. There are aspects of what we call the false imagination, a certain way of thinking about the world. Birth is described in video 202. Birth is the idea that things have a history. They've come into being through a variety of causes. This is one of these common sense understandings which you've probably never thought to question. That mountain is there because of geological forces in the past. I'm here because of my parents and of their DNA mixing up. We have these stories about the world. We give it continuity through these stories. The idea that it popped into existence at this very moment isn't probably one that you have given much thought to. But that's actually what's happening, if you can get back to a purely empirical understanding. This world has popped into existence at this very moment, just like a dream does. A dream pops into existence at the very moment of the dream, along with its history, along with memories and all notions of birth, all the causes that have given rise to it. So that's birth. It's part of our essential assumptions about the way things are. No birth. This is the idea that things aren't as they seem. This is very much the scientific understanding that what we experience is quite different to the reality. So we experience the world being flat. Science will tell us, no, it's round. We experience the world as solid. Science will tell us, no, it's mainly empty space. Things like this. What is real is the interplay of subatomic entities. That's reality, not what we're experiencing with our senses. So this is no birth. It's saying the world is not as it is. There's all sorts of other causes going on. Birth is understanding the causes in time, but no birth is understanding the causes in terms of some kind of substructure which is giving rise to our experience. So there's very much a focus on some other reality which is quite different to the one that we're supposed to be experiencing through our senses. So again, this is focusing on the world, trying to understand it, trying to make sense of it. Emptiness and non-emptiness. Do we discriminate in terms of emptiness and non-emptiness? Well, again, these aren't terms which come naturally to mind. They seem a bit technical once again. But this follows on from birth and no birth. And we can just go along with the usual scientific understanding. Is the world made up of fundamental particles? Is it made up of atoms? Is this the fundamental reality? Well, in the Buddhist days, there was this belief that the world is made up of fundamental entities. They were called dharmas. And various Buddhist schools came up with lists of these dharmas. It's quite different to the modern atomic understanding. We might not understand or appreciate a lot of what the Buddhists called fundamental particles or dharmas in the same way. Some of them were psychological in nature, for example. But they came up with these lists of dharmas. But then some people would say, well, these dharmas aren't actually real. They don't have any intrinsic substance. They were empty. So this is it. Emptiness and non-emptiness is getting into a debate about the reality, or otherwise, of fundamental particles. That there's something real about them, or not real. And science itself seems to, the more it looks into atoms, these fundamental particles, the more they seem to dissolve into abstract entities, quarks or strings or whatever. So anyway, this is a bit philosophical, but it's what happens when you start focusing on the world. This is when you get philosophical. This is what philosophy is about. It's about thinking about the world, what it's made up of, and what it's made up of. Atoms, are they real or not? Empty or not? Do they have substance or not? Self-nature and no self-nature. Self-nature is the assertion that this is a thing in itself. This is a mouse, this is a video camera, this is a head. Things in themselves. The world is made up of objects. And then you might argue, well, it's not really. An object's just a thing made up of other things, and so on. But all these things, as Enlightenment practitioners, we step back from. In brackets, Professor Suzuki's written, these things are not discriminated by the knowing one. This is the one that appreciates that all of this has arisen in awareness, and is practicing bringing the attention back to this awareness being no different from the attention itself. This is mind only. In mind only, we are not letting the attention be sucked in to the world that presents itself to us. We're not getting sucked into its history. We're not getting sucked into what it's apparently made up from. And we're not getting sucked into its apparent reality. In this way, we achieve what was described in the previous verse as kingship of the triple world. Although life presents us with things that we have to deal with and get on with, we don't let these things press our buttons. We don't let these things feed our habit energy, the habit energy being the pattern of our moods. We relax into the realization of mind only. It's also the realization the realization that none of this is of any ultimate concern.